you know, I go back to those times, and I'm going back to them now, because for me, it's just a choice of the moment. You know, I can work something in oil painting, I can work something in photography, I can create a fiction piece from it, it could be a poem. It can be embodied in anything I want to embody it in. When you have the notion, it's up to you as an artist to render the notion in the way that you see fit at that moment. And that might change. You know, you might take a photograph, and later on you're working with the idea, the image in your head, you know what that shot is, you get developing it, you work at different angles, crop it, and suddenly you're born to poetry, or you're born to a story. Or the photographs alone could be laid out in a narrative that tell a story. And you go back and forth between these things, and one doesn't exclude the other. They actually work as a conversation for me. I brought in one of the photographs, the fifth one in from the right side there, is the cover of this book. And because I was already a professional photographer when I started publishing poetry, my publishers have pretty much worked with me and let me have some cover control to a degree. And so that's actually this book cover. And this is very North Carolina-centric work. It's all labor. The whole book is labor poetry. And that photo very much represents for me time I lived in the waters and worked as a commercial fisherman. And spent time out there to where everything that you're surrounded by is rather surreal after a while. And the water has a life of its own. I love the line he said about, who was it that said the ocean can see you earlier today? Who said that?
Lance Simpson.
You hear that? Okay, how did he put it? He said, you can't, there's a sound side, there's a safe side, and I think he was talking about his song, Sound Side. And then beyond that, he said,
if you can see the ocean,
the ocean can see you. And so the idea is the ocean is this living, this living entity, and it is an embodiment, and it's filling many lives. When we were out working on the waters, you never knew what you were going to haul up in the nets, and those guys didn't mention anything about jumping mullets. So they must have been fishing with rods, because when you're using nets, you're out for all sorts of other things, like jumping mullet is a big catch in North Carolina, has always been. And we were out there for days and days, and there's a whole different life going on out there. And so that photograph for me represented that. And there's a poem in here that is a sound poem. So I want to start by reading that. And this is, if I can get my fingers on it, this is Casting Vessel. So here's just an example of how these things go together. How photograph can easily render itself in a poem or vice versa. And how that text can speak to it, conversation between the text and the actual visual. This is Casting Vessel. Pamlico Sound, flamingos, hot pink, gentle grace braced on one leg. Against the feathered snow, the swans are wearing black masks, the Spanish moss is hanging. We're netting tall trees surrounded by kudzu, the greenest vines creeping as we net the jumping mullet and shrimp. Drift nets cross the bank on the Atlantic, the outer banks of Carolina's highest corner of Bermuda's Triangle, way up past Emerald Isle. The voices of 1,000 waterfowl carry our boat with waving motion back to you. We gig flounder and scoop up live scallops with their iridescent rim of blue eyes shining from the very crease of protection. Not a crease on the water, the breeze remains among the treetops, kissing fluffs of swan clouds slipping from the blue sound of sky above, dotted by winged goose and diving ducks, those who pierce the crest of waves to fish with the skill of pelicans by the sound of sky and sea, surrounding and holding all of this sacred blue bowl of intricate design. So just this moment on the water and letting everything you've seen for the last few days catch up to you and lead you into this very precise, almost still life effect of what you see on the water. And I look at a lot of witnessing poetry or meditative poetry the same way that you look at a culmination of objects, a culmination of elements that compose what you might consider a still life. There's an example, there's two right next to each other, almost center up here. And the one directly behind you, you're my earmark, is a table in Rosario, Argentina. And you can see a plastic bottle there, a little plastic dish. And then the table itself is constructed out of little pieces of ceramics and stone. And the medium that holds those together on the table, that creates the mosaic, in that rich of a lush area, it's actually a very deep, dense part of the, I don't know if you would call it forest, not really forest, it's very coastal forest, or coastal woods maybe is a better way to say it, on the Parana River. It reflects all of that back. So for me, the table here, what we're seeing, we're not really looking at the table, we're looking at what the table's been created from, which is the earth there, the clay, the rocks, it's everything that's already born there of the soil. We have the trees and the reflection, and then what we have on top is the human noise. So all the little bits of plastic that we're eating from. You know, so there's a tension there that I'm very interested in, the tension of that. Why are we eating from these things? Why are we creating plastic? You know, it's just more petroleum use. And we're digesting that every time we eat out of it. You know, but it's sitting on all this beauty that's of the natural world, and it reflects back at us in that. The one right next to it is a dance floor, and in the same location. They're both in Rosario, Argentina. And that dance floor has a very, very thick mirror next to it on one side, and the other side is a big, thick glass window. And this just happened to come together because of the way the light was that day, because of the way the mirror and the glass were hitting each other. So the mirror is supposed to reflect the dancers in front of it, but what it's catching is the grass that's outside on the ground, and it's storing it up against that mirror and reflecting it down on the floor because of the big plate glass across from it. So it looks again like the grass is coming through a very natural world on a very wood floor, but it's all coming from this glass, which is man-made, but from natural substance. So it's another type of still life. But then there's still lives in nature. If you look next to that, we have this ocean scene, and it's just that ebb of dusk, you know, right before it becomes total darkness. We have that just that moment, that element on the water, which is also like a still life. There's a lot of life happening there, but it's that moment that you catch it, that you witness that moment, you have clarity. You know, there's a lot of poets that will say that their poetry is a reflection of these moments of light, these moments of enhancement, moments of elevated thought, moments of elevated emotion, moments of significant understanding of what's around them, or curiosity about it. Because we may not understand something, but we can still work with it. And those things are very important to me and to my work as well, and I think probably for most poets. And photographers. There's not a lot of difference in the affect when you're gathering information to render a poem than there is in photography. They're very similar forms.